The webinar started. Let people start piling in. Cool. I feel like we should have like music playing or like a countdown or something. All right, well, I'll get things started as participants join. So welcome and thank you to everyone for joining us tonight for a Q&A session with Mount Hood Ski Patrol. Tonight we're joined by 3 Ski Patrol team members who will first do some overview discussion of what Mount Hood Ski Patrol is all about. And then from there, we'll jump into some questions and answers from you guys. So feel free to pop those questions in the Q&A function or the chat function of Zoom. So starting us off tonight will be Dave Winterling. He is the patrol chief and trainer who will go over the organization and history. Also joining us is Courtney Walsh, who is the hill captain and trainer who will be going through a typical day on Mount Hood with Mount Hood Ski Patrol. And last but definitely not least, we've got Glenn Anderson, who is the recruiting director and trainer who will review what the first year on patrol looks like in regards to tryouts, first aid training, sled training, and all that jazz. So without further ado, I will pass things off to Dave to get things started. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Liz. We appreciate it. And thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to folks about joining Mount Hood Ski Patrol. Last year, our tryouts were about the same time, late March, but as you know, that was a bad time. So our tryouts got canceled as we went into the pandemic. Normally, tryouts for us, a lot of our attendees come word of mouth, or we'll put up posters in shops around town. And this is a bad year for that. So this is a great opportunity for us to talk a little bit about patrol and hopefully answer some questions for anybody that's interested. Okay. So like Liz mentioned, here's the presenters for tonight, myself, Courtney Walsh, and Glenn Anderson. You'll notice that all 3 of us are trainers. That's a big focus of Mount Hood Ski Patrol. A lot of skills involved. All 3 of us are first aid trainers. Courtney and myself are sled trainers. And Glenn is an on-hill trainer for our associate patrollers. So as Liz mentioned, here's what we're going to talk about tonight. Me and then Courtney and then Glenn. We've got a picture here of the inside of the Govey building, which is our cabin. As you pull into government camp, it's on the left-hand side. And you can see this is pre-COVID. This is one of our apprentice classes gathered around one of our instructors, and they're getting ready to go out on the hill for some training that day. So my portion of the presentation is going to be an overview and then a little bit about the history of Mount Hood Ski Patrol. There's a picture here in front of Timberline. I think this is late 1940s. The members would assemble and salute. Good luck getting our membership to do that these days. I love the old pictures though. Okay, so within Mount Hood Ski Patrol, currently we have about 165 active patrollers. We also have mountain hosts, but the presentation tonight is going to be focused on the ski patrol team. We have separate tryouts for the host team. All of us are volunteers. In general, we work downhill during the week, and on weekends we're up here up at Mount Hood doing patrol in any of the 4 areas. We are a chapter of National Ski Patrol, NSP. That's a big benefit for us in that we have access to the NSP training programs and some deep equipment discounts. And if our members move to another state, you can generally just join another patrol with the credentials that you have here. And every year we have members move in from out of state. You know, we get a number of new members every year that are patrollers from out of state. And our mission on the Hill, no surprise, safety, first aid, and patient transport. So we work at all the areas on Mount Hood. There's the 4 alpine skiing areas: Timberline, Ski Bowl, Summit, and Mount Hood Meadows. And we also have Nordic patrollers that work at Teacup. Generally, our patrollers will focus on one of those areas, but you can patrol at multiple areas in a year. Glenn is on teams both at Timberline and Ski Bowl, and I've patrolled at all 4 of the alpine areas this year. And I even did a day at Teacup and got humiliated on cross-country skis. Character building. Okay, so we have a couple different types of patrollers. Hill patrollers, or what NSP calls an alpine patroller, are the patrollers that pull sleds. They'll do first aid on the hill, and they'll transport patients back down to the first aid room. Associate patrollers are similar. They have almost all the same training requirements, except the sled pulling portion. So the associates will respond to cases on the hill, and they will also do more time in the first aid room during the day. Nordic patrollers are focused over at the Teacup area. A lot of the same skills. We train first aid together. Nordic patrollers will not be attending the March 20th training session, but we would still be taking applications here, and we'll set up a slightly parallel interview and tryouts process for the Nordic team. And then bike patrollers is something that we've done for years at Ski Bowl. A lot of our winter patrollers will also patrol on bikes in the summer. We did formalize this last year. We have more rigorous tryouts and training. That sort of went along with Timberline opening up their bike park summer before last. Okay, a little bit about the history of Mount Hood Ski Patrol, and our history really parallels the history of climbing and skiing on Mount Hood. And it really goes back to the 1890s. Most of the activity back then on Mount Hood was actually on the north side, Cooper, Spur, and Cloud Cap. It was easier to get to the north side. You could take a train out to Hood River and horse and buggy to get up to Cloud Cap Inn. And there was a lot of big alpine climbs back then. The Mazamas organization started back then. There's a picture on the left. They would head uphill out of Cloud Cap. They had fixed ropes going up Cooper Spur on the mountain. There's a picture there on the left with a bunch of people post-holing it up. That was a pretty tough group. It was all leather and wool clothing. There was no Gore-Tex, no sunscreen, no sunglasses. It was a different world, but it was a big deal back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. 1920s and 30s, skiing really took off. There's a picture there also on the north side. That was at Cooper Spur, and that's actually a couple of patrollers because that's one of our sleds there at the Cooper Spur warming hut. In the 1930s, skiing really took off on the south side of the mountain. That went along with Timberline Lodge being built and Timberline Road going in. So the south side access got a lot better, especially starting in 1937 when Timberline Road started to get plowed. So to go skiing, you could drive up to Timberline and ski down the Glade Trail instead of hiking up. So at that point, we were founded in 1937. A lot of the climbing organizations started to complain to the Forest Service that they kept seeing skiers that had fallen down on the Glade Trail and that were injured, and they needed someone to help. So in 37, the Forest Service hired Hank Lewis, who was the first patroller, and he recruited a number of other patrollers. They took a first aid class through the Red Cross in Portland, and they modified some sleds. You can see the dog sleds there on the right. They put a metal bracket on the front with a handle so that you could have one patroller on the front and one on the back to ski it downhill. About the worst ergonomic setup you could possibly imagine on an ungroomed trail, but that's how we started out for the first 20 years. And then in 1938, since skiing was really booming all over the country, NSP got founded, and Mount Hood Ski Patrol and a couple of orgs on the East Coast started it up. When NSP was first founded, a third of the members were Mount Hood Ski Patrollers. And then into the 1940s, first half of that decade was World War II. Skiing activity on the mountains really slowed down. The country was focused on other things. The Army started up the 10th Mountain Division, which was formed to fight in the mountains in Europe. And that group was basically the first group of backcountry skiers. They all basically had sort of tele gear, and a lot of the trainers and a lot of the members of the 10th Mountain Division were Mount Hood Ski Patrollers. At the end of the war, when they came back, the ski industry in the US really took off. The folks that came out of the 10th Mountain Division founded a lot of the popular ski areas in the US and some of the companies. In 1949, one of our members developed a splint, the Johnson splint, which is now used by ski patrol organizations all over the country for knee injuries or lower leg injuries. And if you join, you'll become very familiar with that splint. One of the personalities on our patrol is Buzz Bowman. Buzz this year has 75 years as a ski patroller. The last time he was on the hill was Ski of the Glade last year in the spring. There's some pictures on the left of Buzz when he was a teenager back in 1948. He's standing in front of a building that we now know as Charlie's in government camp. The door on the left is, at that time, was the ski patrol office. That's where we kept the sleds and the gear. And then on the right, there's a picture of Buzz Cut, which is a run at Timberline. They named that after Buzz. Buzz has more seniority than any other ski patroller in the US. We know that because we tried to get him a seniority award when he hit 70 years. Probably the longest seniority of anyone in the world, and still active. In the 1950s, there was a couple of Mount Hood ski patrollers that went over and skied in Europe, and they saw a different type of sled, which you see on the left. The Oec sled, it's got the fixed handles in the front and the back that make it a lot better to ski with. So Mount Hood Ski Patrol bought some of those. We started using them in 1960. The Olympics was held in Squaw Valley, and they contracted with us to come down and run the patrol operations for the Olympics. And by the way, one of our members currently is contracted to be in charge of ski patrol operations at the 22 Beijing Olympics. So we hope those come off as planned. And if so, we'll have our eyes on ski patrol operations over there. In 65, the Govey building was constructed. The picture on the lower left, that's our home base up in government camp. When it's not COVID pandemic time, There's bunks upstairs, kitchen downstairs, gear storage, and we do a lot of meetings and social events in there in the winter. And then the last 50 years, the milestones here are really about how the organization has expanded. In 75, we added the associate patrollers that don't pull sleds. 96 was our first snowboarder. Our patrol chief last year, Rachel Lieber, has a picture on the right there. She was the first snowboard patrol chief for Mounted Ski Patrol. In 97, we added the Nordic patrol team. In 05, the host program, which was at Timberline, was pulled in. Teacup ski area was created in 2016 for Nordic patrollers. And if you haven't been there, it is a beautiful facility for cross-country skiing. I would definitely encourage you to try that out. That's where our Nordic patrollers work. And then last year was our first formal year for bike patrol. And we actually have a couple of apprentices now, new patrollers that are going to be full-time bike patrol. So that's a big milestone for us. All right. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Courtney Walsh.
Hi, I'm Courtney Walsh. I'm going to take you through a typical day of a patroller. And this typical day is representative of a patrol day after you have finished all of your training and all of those first year requirements, which Glenn will talk about after I'm finished telling you about a typical day. So next slide, please, Gabe. So a typical patrol day, if you live in town, which I do, starts really early in the morning, incredibly early, waking up at 3:45 or 4, whatever time you need to wake up to get up to government camp, which is generally where we meet up. And of course, I think Dave may have mentioned this, but a lot of what we have pictured here and a lot of what we are talking about here is pre-pandemic. A lot of things have changed with the pandemic. Of course, a lot of things haven't, but if you're joining patrol, it's kind of a longer term commitment. So we're going to be talking about things kind of how they'll be going back to after the pandemic, but we've made accommodations. And one of the things that's changed this year is traffic is nuts. If you have been driving up to the mountain, and I'm sure if you're here, probably a lot of you have, you know that traffic can be wild. So for folks who work up on the mountain, as paid staff or as volunteers, like we have to beat that traffic. So you might have to get up to government camp at 5:45, 5:50 and just wait up there just to beat the traffic. So non-pandemic times we carpool so that we aren't taking up a ton of parking spots at the resorts, but pandemic times, that's not the best idea. So early morning, next slide, please, Dave. So again, early arrival. The photo on the left is at Timberline, entrance to the first aid room. And the photo on the right is at Ski Bowl, entrance to the castle, which is the first aid gathering area. So next slide, please. We generally get there, we haul all of our gear into the locker room. This is the locker room in Timberline. Again, different this year. You can see Glenn in that photo booting up, but we get ready, we kind of chit chat, and we all get ready in time for the next slide, the morning meeting. So every morning, no matter where you're patrolling, we have a meeting where we discuss events for the day. A lot of time there are ski patrol training opportunities, either for the paid staff or for volunteer. Sometimes we'll have trainees, which you'll be familiar with if you go through the tryouts process and become an apprentice. There will be races, certain lifts will or won't be running, weather conditions, avalanche danger. We talk about all the things we need to discuss to prepare for the patrol day. And we assign morning duties and, shifts where we'll be throughout the day. And it's the same on the Nordic side. I know they have shifts throughout the day where they need to be in certain areas and just need to meet up and get ready to go out. So next slide, please. One of the big benefits of being on ski patrol, I think a lot of people are kind of aware of this as being a benefit, but we do get to be the first folks on the mountain. It's not always a benefit. Depends on the weather, depends on the conditions. Sometimes it's really crusty and awful and kind of scary and dangerous up there, and we have to kind of suss out if it's safe for the public, and we have to make it safe for the public. So that's a lot of what our morning tasks are. But I mean, if you have woken up that early and if you love being on patrol, it kind of doesn't really matter. You still get to be the first out on the mountain, and it's really rewarding to be the first folks out there. So while you're doing your jobs, you can get in some good turns. Usually it's pretty good. Next slide. So chores that we do, maintaining the mountain and making the mountain safe. A lot of what we do is in effort to prevent accidents from happening. So depending on whatever the weather has been like, we might have to dig out bamboo, de-ice, clearing off rime from rope lines, because if you can't see a rope line, you might ski into it, marking hazards, creating closures, opening closures. I think on the next slide, Dave, if you want to move to the next one, we have to be preparing all of the tower pads again. If you can't see it, you might ski into it, and that's not an injury that we want to deal with. And then on the left in the photo there, you can see one of the toboggans being de-iced. The main goal in kind of preparing the toboggans for the day is if you get a call on the radio and somebody's injured and they need your help, they need you right away. So you need to be able to flip that toboggan down and open up the handles and take it and go. It needs to be ready to go. So not only do we de-ice the bottoms of all the toboggans, we check to make sure that everything is in good working order, that there are no cracks, there's no missing connections or anything like that, and that the first aid supplies that are with the toboggan, like Dave mentioned, there's a J splint in every toboggan because we do commonly use those, as Dave said. We're just checking the supplies to make sure that everything's there so that when you do need a toboggan, you can just grab it and go and know that it's ready for you. Next slide, please. And then probably what a lot of folks assume, there's a lot of, patrolling out on the hill, a lot of skiing and riding. Again, this year with COVID, there's really nowhere for us to kind of go and be sitting and waiting. To a certain extent, and I'll explain that in a couple of slides, but for the most part, it's really important for us to be out on the mountain, keeping an eye on what folks are up to, what the weather's looking like, how the snow is looking for anything that we may have missed in the morning or anything that's kind of needing more maintenance throughout the day, answering questions, giving directions, keeping an eye on folks, making sure people are safe, and also skiing and riding a lot, especially if the weather's great and the snow conditions are great. We communicate well together as a patrol. Like, I'm going to go take a run, you wait here, and taking turns, and you got to check out all the stashes and make sure everything's looking good and safe. So next slide, please. Yeah, just like I said, just kind of helping people out. Sometimes we get called to things, and oftentimes you just find people who need help, or you find friends up there, as you can see in the middle photo. And then on Nordic Patrol, I think it's just a quieter pace there. They're kind of out patrolling. Less obstacles, I think, for people to crash into, fortunately. Next slide, please. This photo is taken inside of RC. RC stands for Rescue Center. That's the building that's at the top of the upper bowl chair at Ski Bowl. And that's where patrol convenes. Again, pre-COVID, obviously, at this point. And I think here it's just nice to see that it's it's camaraderie. We're out there together. We're all kind of doing the same thing. We have similar backgrounds and similar training, but we all also do come from different walks of life. So it's fun to be up there and kind of be together. And a lot of us work on teams. So you're up there with the same group of patrollers. And then sometimes you'll have different folks coming and going and supplemental patrolling, not on a team. And so kind of bringing them into the group. And it's just a really, it's a really special community to be a part of. So here's a nice photo of us having lunch together. So next slide, please. Big part of what we do, I think I've alluded to it as far as preparing the sleds, is you get a call for somebody who's injured or sick and they need help. You're going to go out there and you're going to find them where they are and render first aid. And if they can't get themselves out of the situation that they're in, and often they cannot, you bring a toboggan with you and the supplies that you need, and you treat them, you know, as much as they need to be treated, but you also try and get it taken care of quickly so that you can safely move them out of the elements, because being out in the elements is a big part of what can contribute to making folks uncomfortable when they're hurt or when they're injured on the mountain. So there's a lot that goes into the first aid training and toboggan training. I think Glenn's going to talk more about that later, but you can see here, you know, packaging people up and putting them in the burrito, in the toboggan, taking them down hills, sometimes very steep hills. On the photo that's on the top right corner, you can see someone in the handles in the front of the sled. And then on a steeper hill, we often will have someone tail roping. So that's what you can see the person behind the toboggan doing. They have a rope that's connected to the back of the toboggan. And that's a way to help slow the sled down and control where the sled goes, especially in steeper, kind of wackier terrain. You need a tail roper. There's also a chain brake that you can drop down, but I'm getting into the exciting part of toboggan training. You'll have to excuse me. So on the bottom right corner, you can see that's a photo that's at Timberline. Timberline is known as an upside down resort, meaning that the first aid room is actually in the middle or even above a lot of the runs. So if someone gets injured or sick and needing transport and they're below the first aid room, we need to figure out how to get them in their toboggan up to the first aid room. And one of the common ways we do that is by loading a loaded toboggan onto the chairlift securely, of course. And the chairlift brings them up and then we take them from there. Yeah, next slide, please. So part of a typical patrol day, like I talked about in the morning meeting, is we have shifts. We have kind of a schedule for the day. You have your opening tasks, and then there's a lot of skiing and riding. And at some point, maybe once or twice during the day, you sit what's called sitting bump. And depending on what chairs and what terrain is open on the mountain, where you'll be located waiting on bump is the highest operational part of the mountain to where you can go downhill, which is always the fastest way to get to someone who needs you, where you can go downhill to get to a patient. So at any given moment, there are several patrollers who are scheduled to be sitting or waiting on bump. And that means that you are ready to respond. You're not out skiing, you know, you're not having lunch. Well, sometimes you have lunch whilst you're waiting on bump, but you're not out skiing around. You're waiting to be called and to jump into action. So there's always someone who's kind of ready to go, and that's someone who's sitting bump. And oftentimes when you're on bump, you're also kind of dispatch. So folks who've, you know, worked in different walks of life are aware dispatch is kind of the person who's in charge of all of the communications coming in and going out. A call goes in, the call goes to dispatch. We're all listening, but no one goes anywhere until you've been dispatched by the person on dispatch to go there. And then we're all aware of who's there and where the equipment is. So we have to be organized. And, you know, as excited as you might be to get to someone who needs you, you need to wait to be dispatched. Next slide, please. So the day starts early and it goes all day, and there's no, oh, the weather's not great, I'd like to go home now, or I'd like to beat traffic, or any of that stuff that you get to do when you're free skiing. We stay until the resort is closed or until parts of the resorts are closed. Some resorts have night skiing, and so while Mountain Hood Ski Patrollers, volunteer patrollers can participate in night skiing at Ski Bowl and at Timberline, and I think at Meadows too. I think they're happy to have our volunteer support basically whenever we are available. We sweep the areas of the mountain that are going to be closed. So say, for example, at Timberline, which is where we are in the photo on the left, for night skiing, they're only operating the Pucci and the Molly chair. And so we're going to sweep the areas of the mountain that aren't going to be open anymore, meaning that we're going to ski from the top to the bottom, kind of sweeping left to the right. And we're calling something like we're closing or sweep or something like that to let folks know you need to get out of here. And we don't want to leave you on the mountain and have the chairlift be closed down and you get down to the bottom of a chairlift and there's no one there and there's no way to get out. So we're looking for people who might need help or who didn't realize that maybe the area they're in is about to be closed and they could kind of get trapped in there or kind of have to figure out a way to walk out. So that's what sweep is, just kind of checking, final check at the end of the day to make sure that everybody's out. You know, you're always kind of looking for tracks that go out into the trees and never come back or stuff like that, just depending on where you are. And then, like I mentioned, you know, as part of the camaraderie piece, I think Dave and Glenn, I think would agree with me and say that the Mountain Hood Ski Patrol community feels like a family to a lot of us. And so there's a lot of debriefing at the end of the day. A lot of times we go through some stuff, you know, it depends on what the day has brought. And, you know, you need to have a chance to debrief and talk about it with folks who have been through similar experiences, or just to share something really cool that happened or something that you saw or did, or find out about something that you heard about. So here we are on the photo on the right, we're at the Govey building. So definitely a lot of action, after action opportunity to discuss what happened. So that's what debrief is all about. And we often will have that too at the end of a shift at the resort. We'll have that as another kind of closing meeting at the end of the day. Just to talk about cases we had that day and kind of things that went right and things that, you know, we feel we could tighten up a little bit, and ways that we can communicate even better with the paid staff and support them and what they need. Different areas need different things. Next slide, please. So a lot of times I think we think about patrolling, we're just thinking about the winter. And of course, in the winter here, we do cat skiing at Palmer. So a patroller will sometimes sit, we call it super bump, if you're up on the very, very high up area where not a ton of folks are up there, but you still need to be up above people. You can't help anybody if you have to hike or ride in a cat or ride in a chairlift or a snowmobile to get to them. It's best to go downhill to people who need you. So we're pretty lucky that we get to participate in a lot of the cat skiing that goes on up on Palmer Glacier, both in the winter and then in the summer, you get to ride the chairlift up there, of course, which I think is in the next slide. Next slide, please. So, yep, summers. So yeah, we think a lot about the winter, and in ski patrol, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, have you skied in August, September?
All 12 months.
Yeah, so we can ski, depending on the snowpack, the snow's up there on Palmer, and in those early mornings, it's like spring skiing. You can go skiing and or riding, to the snowboarders, and finish up in the morning and go hiking and swimming in Alpine Lake afterwards. It's a perfect summer day. So we patrol in the summers too. It's a little bit less like team, every other Saturday kind of commitment. A lot fewer folks will patrol in the summers, but the opportunity's there. And I'll say, hot tip for people who are interested in doing their training, you'll do your training and then you'll be finished with your training in the spring, and you should go and patrol in the summer. It's a little slower, but it's also just really nice, and you can get some experience while everything is still nice and fresh. So it's just great up there in the summer. Next slide, please. And so as part of being a patroller, we need to keep our skills fresh and refreshed. National Ski Patrol has requirements for us to maintain our certifications, and Mount Hood Ski Patrol, of course, does too. So Glenn will talk about the initial training requirements. These are the ongoing training requirements. Every year we have a medical refresher, which is 1 full day. This year it was virtual, so that was a little bit different. But there's also, in addition to the 1 full day, I think there's kind of an online section that you do every year as well. And that can take quite a chunk of time. And it's just a refresher on 1/3 of what we've learned in our training year, which is, it's a full on like high level college course level training class. But Glenn will tell you about that. So we cover 1/3 of that content, and then we do scenarios based practice, and it's a full day of scenarios, and they're usually pretty tricky scenarios and training. And then we do a chair evacuation and self-evacuation, and not all folks, if they're comfortable, feel comfortable practicing and doing self-evacuation, but it's available to folks who do feel comfortable doing it. I'm sure that you've heard that some areas have put their chair evacuation skills to practice this year. So that's important for us to know how to do and how to support. And if something happens with the chairlift, we all know what to do and what equipment to use, and we practice using it, and we have to be certified and signed off on that yearly. And then for our toboggan refreshers, we are required to demonstrate our skills every year in order to maintain our certification to be toboggan pullers. And there are also lots of opportunities for toboggan enhancement seminars. There are trainings all the time for different sleds, different techniques, you know, a training on tail rope or a training on the 4-handled sled, like Dave had mentioned before. And you can kind of knock out your toboggan refresher by taking one of those trainings, or you can just geek out and take all those trainings just for fun because it's fun. Just this last Saturday, we had the women's clinic training up at Mount Hood Meadows, and it was a blast. Yeah, next slide, please. And then, of course, we are CPR certified, and we go through our 2-year cycle. So on your off year, you still have to do a demonstration that you can still give effective CPR. And every other year, you need to take the full class and do your demonstration. And then, of course, we're all Avalanche trained. And that's every 3 years to maintain your certification. You can do it more often than that if you like, and people do. Next slide, please. And then there are even more opportunities to participate in Ski Patrol. We will participate at Snowvana, Ski Fever. We do bicycle support, first aid support for a lot of marathons and races that happen in town and around the Portland metro area. And that's really fun. And actually, it's interesting because folks will see us kind of in our patrol gear and be like, oh, Mount Hood Ski Patrol. And that's actually a great recruitment opportunity for us when we can talk to people about how, oh yeah, it's not just on the mountain, you know, we can put our first aid skills into practice anytime. And then you can see the photo on the right, that's at Skiable. So bike races and events that are happening up at Skiable, and now I guess at Timberline too, now that they have their bike courses open as well. So providing first aid and care and transport in those environments also. Next slide, please. And so that's it for my portion on a typical day and your typical kind of requirements for ongoing patrollers. And I'll pass it over to Glenn Anderson, who will tell you about joining Mount Hood Ski Patrol.
All right, hopefully you can hear me. So in the aspect of joining MSB and what the first year looks like, once you decide that you want to join, we are going to have tryouts on the 20th up at Skiable. That's for a ski evaluation only. Anybody interested in the Nordic or the bike portion of patrol do not need to be at this event. So what does that mean? What's that going to be? So we're going to all meet and then probably have 2 or 3 runs on the upper bowl. and you'll be evaluated by some of our trainers. And what they're looking for, some people don't think they're good enough, and some people think they're amazing. You really need to be teachable and show a good, stable skill set.
Can I add one quick thing, Glenn?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
It's not just ski skills, it's also snowboarding skills, just to be.
No, that's a great point. And it's a question that I've been asked a lot on the Hill. Do you guys let snowboarders in? And they actually make up a pretty big percentage of our patrol. So either way works. I think we have a few people that actually do telemark skiing as well. So that'll be, take really 2 or 3 runs, probably a few groups, should take 3 or 4 hours. And then in years past, we've had the interview portion in the same day, which turned out to be a long day. But with COVID, that's gone to an online situation, which works out really well. And that'll happen a few weeks after the ski test. So after that, we will pick our next class or candidates for the OEC class, as we call it. And if everything is normal, we will have kind of a meet and greet deal in June to get to know each other and get more presentation on what's going to happen. And then once that's done, we start training in earnest in September. And that is the OEC program, which is this little gem right here. It's our version of the medical training run by NSP, very similar to EMT training. That will be done every Tuesday night, roughly 3.5 hours, usually at St. Vincent or Portland Providence here in Portland. And that'll run roughly 18 weeks, depending on some extra days that we do. And here you will learn everything there is to know about on-hill life-saving skills, from bandaging, splinting, backboarding, bleeding, birthing. We really cover everything you could ever imagine. So it's very intense. It's very important. We all take it very seriously because we use all these skills. So that ends in a 100-question written final, followed by a 2 medical practical scenario finals. And that wraps up in early January. And once you graduate from that class, then we move on to online. Oh, a couple more things since Dave has the slide up. It's very important during that time that you keep up with the reading, the homework assignments, and then the skill sets, which we check you off every week on. So if you just keep up with all your homework, there's no reason you can't get through it. All right, Dave, next slide. Kind of a delay on my end. Yeah, so once you graduate from OEC, then we move to on-hill training, and they vary just a little bit between the hillers and the associates, but they're about the same. They have about 10 weeks of weekend training. For the hillers, it's on-hill mountain orientation, and then specifically sled training. As you can see from some of these slides, it's how the proper techniques to handle a sled down any terrain, as well as tail roping for the steeper slopes. For associates, you also have 10 days, and these are spread out amongst 3 different resorts. And orientation, learning the areas, local protocols, and then more first aid room. So that starts in January and usually wraps up in mid-April. And then the goal is to have you all checked off for toboggans and training. And then in May at our banquet, you would get your crosses and be an official Mount Hood Ski Patrol. I will add that for this tryout, if you're Nordic, you don't need to be there. And if you're bike patrol, you don't need to be there. Those are done differently. And the way the bike patrol will work is if something you want to do, you go through the interview process, and then we would have a on-hill skills test for you, which I think is going to be on May 22nd. And then you'd get brought into the bike program for summer training as an apprentice. And then in September, start the OEC program with the Alpine crew. That about wraps up the mountain training. Next slide, Dave. Sorry, it's not moving here.
This slide is the typical costs first year, Glenn.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, people also ask, what does it cost to really get involved with ski patrol? So you really have 4 components: the book, the OEC book, the course, CPR class, which is mandatory in your first year, and then the dues to both MHSP and NSP. And that's about a $350 outlay out of your pocket. And then additional costs is the gear. We're not, we have to buy all our own gear. I mean, I'm sure everybody will have their own skis, board, but the only requirements is that you have a red jacket and black pants. You don't need those for your training year, but once you're patrolling, they're pretty strict on that. So initial setup, and then you're good to go. And then it's just about getting in, getting up to the mountain and any lodging you might need to do. But really, for all the training we give you, it's pretty reasonable. Next slide.
Yeah, just to jump in, on an annual basis after the first year, the dues work out to about $100 a year.
Correct. And then like every 2 years, there's a small fee to do the recertification for the CPR. So there's a picture. Dave, you want to take this one?
Yeah, that's our 70th anniversary. Was a couple of years ago. We had a whole bunch of patrollers convene up at Timberline. They had a mass ski event going down Glade Trail, which is how we started. Fittingly, we had a big blizzard that day. We got a bunch of pictures, so we always like to put one in on the end. And then it's we're open for questions.
One thing I would add real quick before we start, if this is something you're truly interested in, there's a lot of information on our website, mountedskipatrol.org, under the Join the Patrol tab. There's a link for an email. Send any questions you have. I get those, I answer them. And then there's a link to the application. That'd be great to fill out beforehand, and we'll get you signed up.
Thank you, Glenn.
All right, well, we have some questions piling in. And I did have someone email me some questions prior to the webinar starting. So I will start at the top. In addition to patient care, I'm interested in learning and developing skills related to avalanche mitigation and safety. Are there opportunities with any of the ski areas to learn more about avalanche operations through Mount Hood Ski Patrol?
We have an avalanche training program. That's part of the required training for Mount Hood Ski Patrol. Every year, we do training for some of the paid staff from the ski areas. Just yesterday, we had this weekend, Saturday, Sunday, we had a new paid patroller at Timberline that went through our program. Portland Mountain Rescue also goes through our program. But in parallel, there is good training programs also through Mazamas. But generally, the training that we do for ski patrol will have our trainers doing the training. As a matter of fact, our training director for avalanche training tonight is doing an online session with Mazamas. I hope that answers the question.
Another question, can you train for both bike and Alpine ski patrol?
Absolutely. As Dave mentioned before, Timberline built their park. It was just ski bowl having the bike park. So it was just Alpine patrollers would just show up in the summer and bike patrol. There's no real formal situation. So any combination is great, whether it's just a bike patrol, Nordic bike patrol, or Alpine bike patrol. I do it all the time. It's great. I've actually done both in the same day,
Ooh.
which is pretty unique for the country.
And if I can add, some folks are certified to patrol on skis and on a snowboard. And you might need to kind of go through the training process again on your different equipment if you have these different skills, but some folks do teleskiing and alpine skiing and snowboarding, and then also might patrol on their bike. So we have the opportunity to kind of demonstrate that we have the skill to continue to help someone in that situation, but we have different avenues by which we might do that.
Another question, what and when is the skills test for Nordic patrol?
Let's see, that's a good question. I know most of the candidates, our Nordic director, Steve Potter, has been testing people already at Teacup. So my suggestion, if that's something you're interested in, send an email in. We'll see if we can get you linked up, Steve, to have that done.
And I will include a link to the Contact Mount Hood Ski Patrol, the Joining the Patrol link, and then the application in a follow-up email to everyone that registered and everyone that's here. So you'll have all of that. Another question, what is the time commitment once you are a patroller, and how long do patrollers typically stay on? How many seasons?
You want to take that?
Sure, I can take that. The time commitment is kind of whatever you can commit to. There are different levels of commitment, and there are different benefits that you can get for different levels. Some of us patrol every single weekend. Some of us patrol both days every single weekend. Some of us participate in other parts of patrol, which have different, commitments in the weeknights and whatnot, meetings and trainings and coaching and that kind of thing. But I'd say your minimum commitment would probably, I think it's 8 days.
Yeah, 8 days plus those 2 fall events you talked about.
Right, and plus the 2 training events that we all need to do to maintain our certifications. And you can decide when you want to do those 8 days. You could do them all over winter break if you wanted to, or you can do them all in the summer if you want to. And there is some flexibility with patrol. I mean, this year is a perfect example of it. Some folks didn't feel comfortable patrolling, until vaccines came out or for whatever reason. And I think it's just a piece of communication. If you communicate with the folks, on the council or, whoever, people are really understanding. A lot of times people will take a break, they have a baby or something like that. We're pretty understanding about that. It's a volunteer organization, and you can commit minimally, or you can really overcommit like some folks like to do.
Is Ski Patrol entirely volunteer, or are there paid positions as well? And if they are paid, are they full-time or part-time? Starting wages, any benefits?
Yeah, so our organization is 100% volunteer. And like I mentioned, we have about 165 patrollers, and we work at all the areas. Each ski area, like Timberline and Ski Bowl, will all have their own full-time paid staff ski patrol. Typically, that's a much smaller number of paid patrollers that actually work full-time, 40 hours a week. In general, they're patrolling during the week, Monday through Friday. All the patrollers up there would be paid patrollers. It might be 3 or 4 or 5 paid patrollers on a weekday. And then on a weekend, we'll typically have 10 to 15 volunteers from our organization to supplement that, because that's when they have all the volume. The wages and benefits that you would be eligible for as a paid patroller at Meadows or Ski Bowl or Timberline, I don't have the exact numbers, but if you log on to their websites, you'd see postings for ski patrollers. So you can just go through the HR department at the ski area if you want to be a full-time paid patroller. Some of our members are volunteers and also do paid patrol. You can't be a volunteer at the same area where you are paid. So we have some members, for example, that are paid patrollers at Ski Bowl, and they may volunteer at Timberline. We also have a number of patrollers from Mount Hood Ski Patrol that after a few years decide they want to go full-time paid. So right now there's probably 15 or 20 patrollers at the 3 big areas that came out of MHSP.
I think you went over this a little bit in your presentation, but what kind of medical experience is required? And is there any benefit to obtaining a wilderness EMT as a patroller?
I'll say that there is none required. We teach everything for what we do. Any extra medical training, the woofer course, certainly helpful, but you have to pass the OEC course to patrol.
Another question, what happens if you miss one or more of the OEC sessions?
Go ahead,
I
Dave.
think every year at the beginning of the year, when we talk to the class, we try to encourage them to do their best to get 100% attendance because the class does move pretty quickly. Like I said, or we showed in one of the slides, it's about 14 weeks, one night a week. In reality, almost everybody misses 1 or 2 of the classes at some point. So we're realistic, but we do encourage people to do their best to get them all.
I think I would add too that the key to that really is good communication. If you know something's coming up, just tell us about it. And like Dave said, you can work around certain situations.
On the website, it notes that there's a $25 ticket fee on test day. Do tryouts, are they required to purchase a ticket each day they work and attend training?
I can take that. That's just that's old information. The way it's going to work, you will have an option to buy a full day lift ticket from Ski Bowl for $45. But for the test, we're going to give you bibs. And for whatever amount you give it, you go up, you do your runs, whether it's 2, 3, 4, come back, give us the bib, and you're done. Any extra skiing would be on. If you have a pass, you can stick around, but there's no cost. There's no cost at all to try out.
Yeah, in general, once you join patrol, we hate to pay for skiing. You don't pay when you patrol, and then when you do patrol, you'll typically get a chit, that you can use and ski at a different time, or you can give to one of your friends and they can ski. And like Courtney said, if you patrol enough days, 10 or 12 days at the area, then you can get an individual chit or individual pass or a family pass. So a lot of our patrollers have those.
To add to answering the question about the training, the bib that Glenn talks about, when you're accepted into the training program and you become an apprentice, you'll keep your bib. And anytime you're with patrollers in your training, that bib acts as your lift ticket. So any training day that you have at the resort, and we train at all the different resorts, it's free throughout the training day, and you just need to have your bib, and you need to be with a patroller. You can't take your bib up on a different day that you're not training and be with no patroller and ride that lift for free.
Doing homework. Okay, that kind of leads into another question, is how is it decided which resort you patrol at?
I can take this one. You decide. I think that familiarity with all the different resorts is really important. And we train at all the different resorts to gain some basic level of familiarity with all the different resorts. It's really important to know where to go if you get called to a certain location. But I think it's pretty typical for patrollers to kind of choose a resort as kind of their home resort. And it really is just up to you. There's kind of a different vibe at each resort. I think we all can pick up on that as just, skiers and riders when we're just out and about. So, wherever you feel most comfortable or wherever you feel best on the terrain, maybe what time of year you want to patrol. And like Dave said, some folks will patrol at more than one resort and feel perfectly comfortable at any one of them. So it's up to you.
Are there any benefits? I know you touched on ski passes a little bit, but pro deals, that kind of thing with being on ski patrol.
Yeah, through the National Ski Patrol, they have a link on the website. Well, they have the NSP store where you can buy a lot of gear, at discounted prices. They also have a separate link that's called Pro Deals, where all the popular ski and boot and gear companies do offer NSP members pretty steep discounts. It's typically 30 to 50%. They do like to have patrollers wearing their skis or their boots. It's good advertisement. So that is a very nice perk. There also is some commercial websites. Experticity is one that if you are a ski area employee, and this is either a volunteer or a paid patroller, you can get certified to work purchase through those sites. And that also has similar types of discounts.
I guess another benefit I'd add real quick is we do get deals at other ski resorts if we're a member in good standing. Small resorts can be a free lift ticket or half price at certain places. So that's another benefit.
And yet one more, we're all a bunch of gearheads, a lot of local in-person or online shops. If you show your National Ski Patrol card or just mention, hey, I'm a ski patroller, they'll often give you a first responder discount or something like that. So sometimes it's not on a Pro Deals website or anything like that. All you have to do is ask, and sometimes you're pleasantly surprised. Actually, often at outdoor shops, especially around Portland, I think we are very much supported. So you can get discounts all over the place. I wouldn't abuse it, but it doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah, and I don't think I mentioned this before, but I'm with Mountain Shop, and I can speak that we offer a 15% discount for ski patrollers. So it's not quite the pro deal pricing, but if you need it in a pinch or you're on your way up to the mountain, we can usually help you out there.
And we have one of our members working there upstairs.
At Mountain Shop?
Related organization, yeah.
Oh, Oregon Mountain Community?
Yeah, right.
Okay, cool. Very cool. We do have a couple more questions. What is the average age of patrollers?
I feel like Glenn knows that one.
It's funny, the requirement is to join patrol, you have to be 18. We do have a separate program called the Young Adult Patroller for 15 to 17. But we have, as Dave alluded, Buzz Bowman was 75, I think.
75
we literally have patrollers from 18 into their mid to late 60s. Very active too.
And I'll add something that it's important to take into consideration is it is a big time commitment, especially that training year. And so sometimes when folks are like, oh yeah, I just started med school, or that kind of thing, where you have this other big commitment going on, it just might not be the right time in your life to join patrol, because the training year is a big time commitment. And then you need to maintain your certifications, and you need to get that practice in, not just with the first aid stuff, but with the mountain transport and all of that kind of stuff too. So I don't know if it's so much about the age, but it might be about kind of where you're at in life. How much can you put into ski patrol? So that's part of it.
How many patrollers are you guys looking to bring on with this apprenticeship?
A typical class, we have, I think our targets, if we can get up to 25 Hillers, 10 Nordics, and 8 associates, that'd be a big class. We usually like to cap them at about 35 total for the OEC program. But the typical class would probably be in the 20 to 35 range, sometimes bigger, sometimes a little smaller.
Someone else asked, do Meadows patrollers still have to meet at government camp?
No, typically the Meadows patrollers, for our team patrollers, they will convene in the parking lot there at Meadows this year, because they're outside, and they would meet inside in the patrol room, which is on top of the clinic. It's the second floor of the clinic. On most years, they will meet there in the morning at 7 o'clock, booted up.
And if I might add too, I think one of the big reasons that we do meet at government camp, and some Meadows patrollers do, it's for carpooling reasons. So if you're coming from a different area and you wouldn't normally be driving through government camp, and it doesn't make sense for you to go to government camp first, again, it's about communication. Just communicate with your hill captain for the day and let them know, hey, I'll meet you at the resort at morning meeting or whatever. Some folks carpool up in town and they drive straight to the resort and they go right past the Govy building and government camp. And it's just about communicating about where people can expect to find you at what time.
Someone heard that coachable is an important aspect of being a patroller. What would you say a perfect patroller profile would look like?
I can take that one. Yeah, I'll take that one. Coachability is a big thing. I think that a lot of folks who come on to patrol have a lot of experience with skiing or riding. And, you know, when you're really good at something like that, it can be kind of difficult to change some of your techniques. Skiing on your own or riding on your own is one thing, but handling a toboggan and having the foundational skills and the technique that go into handling a toboggan safely, either in the handles or on tail rope, which of course are two completely different skills. Sometimes it's harder to kind of work with folks who are like really set in their ways, and you need to be open to adjusting your technique so that you can ski in a certain stance and then use that certain stance when you're driving the toboggan or when you're on the tail rope. So coachability is definitely a big factor. And as far as the other things that go into a good profile, I think, you know, you want to be someone that can be calm under pressure. We're in some high pressure situations, not just with whatever we're dealing with our patient, but where they might be. We've had people in trees. So, you know, you've got to be able to kind of think and stay calm under pressure. And then there's a big kind of team aspect that goes into it. You need to be able to work well with other people. And I think that it helps if you can kind of straddle both worlds of taking charge of situations and then also just listening and following directions sometimes, because depending on who got to the case first or who the first responder is, that's generally the person who's in charge of the case. And you don't want someone coming in feeling like they need to take charge. So those are things to take into consideration.
One thing I would add to what Courtney said is we are a service organization, and a very high number of our new members every year are people that have worked in a volunteer capacity, you know, in other organizations in your life. You know, if that is sort of your mindset, that you enjoy giving back, then it's a really good fit.
Someone else asked, will there be other options for tryouts other than March 20th?
It's very difficult, I'll put it that way, but if we can maybe link you up with one of the evaluators on a normal weekend day, we can talk about it, put it that way. But you'd have to be, you know, pretty determined and confident, but yeah, just got to ask.
Is there liability insurance provided by NSP?
We are covered, patrollers in the course of your duties are covered by the Good Samaritan laws in Oregon. So, you know, in the case of if you treat somebody and they say, hey, they didn't do a good job, you're not going to get sued, or if someone tried it, you'd have a very strong case. It's never happened in the years with Mount Hood Ski Patrol. From a medical insurance standpoint, all members have to carry your own medical insurance because, we like the guests, we're always at risk of getting injured, and MHSP does not provide medical insurance to members. You have to carry your own.
We had a question about who handles the explosives and howitzers for avalanche control, and do all mountains use howitzers or some mortars?
When I joined patrol, I really wanted to shoot the guns, and I was disappointed to find out that as a volunteer, we don't. The only resort that has a howitzer over at Heather Canyon is Meadows. Meadows has a team for avalanche mitigation, and they have a bunch of particular slopes that they know are at risk, and they have a morning checkoff, after a heavy snow, that they will go out and either shoot or drop explosives. Same thing at Ski Bowl. There's 2 or 3. They're training a third one right now. Folks that are certified in handling explosives. We don't do that at Timberline, and there are no volunteers that handle explosives. No one in our organization. Although there's a number that would probably have fun doing it.
I'd like to add to that part of kind of the morning tasks, depending on what the snow conditions are, can sometimes involve some avalanche mitigation that Mountain Hood Ski Patrol does participate in that doesn't involve explosives. So things like ski cutting and, other kind of like snow packing, that kind of type of avalanche mitigation. We're closing off areas that just aren't going to cut it for the day. Those are things that we do patrol in, but they don't involve, or that we're involved in, but they don't involve explosives.
Yeah, typically that'll be the Outback at Ski Bowl and Private Reserve and Heather Canyon over at Meadows.
All right, I think we are down to our last question. Oh, nope, we had another question. Are API beacons and probes standard required gear?
Yeah, they are. And shovels. And ropes and harnesses.
And what skills will be evaluated during ski assessment?
Glenn, you want to take that?
Probably more for you.
All right, yeah, so this was actually a big question for me before I joined patrol. And to sort of give you the answer to the question ahead of time, the evaluators are going to look for the way you make your turns. You'll be asked to do short, medium, and long radius turns. A typical reason for being graded down on that is, people that lean back too much. That is very frequent. You need to have good balance. If you go on to the www and Google BERP, burp, that is balance,
Edging,
rotation, and what's the fourth one? I don't even know, but you'll go. It goes through a lot of the components of what we call good turns. That's the ski instructor PSIA way of teaching turning. You'll also be asked to do side slipping. We'll be looking for edge control. You turn your skis sideways to the fall line, and then tilt your boots so you can, in a controlled fashion, move down the hill. That's how we pull sleds down steep terrain, is sideways, side slipping, and good edge control is important. We'll also ask you to do a run off piste. It might be chunky snow, it might be moguls, depending on what's there that day. And like we probably said before, we're not looking for you to launch through it like a Warren Miller skier. We want you to get down confident, solid, in good control, someone that we can watch and say, yeah, that would be a person that we could train a sled and be confident that they'll be safe with a patient. So that's basically it. That's basically the majority, unless Courtney, you can think of something else I missed there.
Well, I remember at tryouts being asked to do some kick turns. Sometimes you have to turn around in a tight spot and do some, what's the word? The bone.
Herringbone uphill.
Herringbones, hiking uphill, because sometimes you got to do that. But yeah, like Dave said, I think they just want, thinking of from the patient's perspective, if you saw the ski patroller who's coming to rescue you and they were out of control or they were showing off, like that's not what instills confidence in your patient. So ski like you're on your way to a patient, quickly but safely.
One more question. I don't know if you guys would have the answer to this, but for paid employees of Avi Control, does prior military mortar experience help?
Well, good question. I can't answer that. I think the main criteria for getting into the Avi Control, say at Meadows, they're going to be looking first for patrollers, that have a medical certification and have the same ski skills that we're talking about here, because all of their Avi Control people are also ski patrollers. So they're going to start with ski patrollers and then train on the avalanche mitigation. It might help a little bit, but I don't think so.
All right, and while everyone musters up their final questions, I think this is a good one to end on, even if we do have a couple after. But what is your favorite part about being on patrol and your least favorite part? Dave, why don't we start with you? Unless someone else has an answer
part
ready.
Is if I can ski up to a case, I have 3 kids. They're all out and they're all, in college. But when I go onto a case and I've got a little kid that's injured and I've got parents that are worried and I can take care of that kid, get him splinted and in a sled and get him safely back to the first aid room, that by far is the most rewarding day for me. After action debrief is pretty good, but I'll say treating kids and helping them is number one. Least favorite, gosh, probably council meetings. There is some admin work that we do behind the scenes to keep patrol running. Courtney is on council as well. We need to do it to keep the organization running, but it's not as fun as being up on the hill.
Courtney?
I can go next. Yeah, I think it's the same for me with Dave. As Dave, you're often interacting with folks when they're having kind of one of the scariest moments of their lives, and or maybe they're just like tired, they're just like, my legs hurt or whatever. But in pretty high stress and scary situations, and you can come in and instill a sense of calm and we're going to take care of this and we're going to get you out of here and you're going to be okay. We're going to pass you off to folks who can get you some pain meds and whatnot. It feels really rewarding to kind of get people out of a sticky situation and take care of their needs and help them feel like someone else is here, someone else is going to take care of me. I'm a preschool and kindergarten teacher in my regular daily life, so I think that I find some parallels with that. And then I think for me, my least favorite part is when the weather is awful or if it's raining and I would not normally be up there in that kind of weather and I have to stay and you have to deal with the weather. And right now, we can't sit inside for very long where it's warm and dry and kind of wait it out. We have to kind of stay outside because of taking COVID precautions. So that's extra tricky this year. But yeah, when I get cold, I think that's my least favorite part. But I do have some fancy gear that helps keep me pretty dry and warm. So you figure it out.
Very similar. I'm in my 7th year of patrolling. And the one thing I never really thought would be so rewarding is the appreciation that we get, not just from patients for the medical, but it could be for any reason. Telling people where to go, helping a kid with their ski on. You just get the feeling that we're really appreciated for all the work we do. So that's kind of hard to put a price on. I had a gal last year, a 7-year-old child that had her hands hurt. They were just cold. So kind of warmed him up, played the whole doctor thing. And the next week she came back and gave me a handwritten note, with a nice picture. And that just, it's awesome. And Courtney kind of stole mine. The worst, cold weather's fine. It's specifically the rain.
Yeah.
We have to be outside setting up the mountain. You can't run and hide. You can't come in for chocolate. The good news, it's pretty infrequent. Probably less than a handful of days I've been on patrol, but it's pretty miserable.
All right, we did get one more question. Are there base patrollers at the areas to handle base area emergencies and flat hill areas on I assume snowmobiles? Is the question.
I think so. We talked a little bit about the hill patrollers who pull toboggans, and the associate patrollers who have all the same training as the hill patrollers except for that toboggan pulling, and some of them can pull empty toboggans and bringing that equipment and gear to a case. And the associate patrollers tend to be whereas hill patrollers will be stationed on bump high up on the mountain, associate patrollers, their main schedule station for the day, in addition to some bump, is at the first aid room, which is generally kind of at the base area. So there's always somebody manning the first aid room. And then again, as a volunteer organization, we're supplementing the paid staff who are there full time. So there's always paid staff around too. And when we are there, they often are taking that opportunity to do trainings elsewhere and let us handle all of the cases and things like that, or they're kind of more in the first aid room or in the lodge, kind of in the patrol areas. And so they would be ones to, I'm assuming by mobiles or snowmobiles is maybe what they're referring to in the question.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, generally terrain park crew will have snowmobiles, access to snowmobiles, and the paid staff will have access to snowmobiles, and they drive the snowmobiles. But oftentimes if you have a patient in your toboggan, you'll be in the handles, rope, this toboggan will be roped to the snowmobile and they'll tow you uphill. So we don't always go uphill with a chairlift. Like at Ski Bowl at the West Side First Aid Room, it's kind of a hike to get from the bottom of the lower bowl chair where you run out to get uphill to the first aid room. So oftentimes they'll meet you there with a snowmobile and pull you up. But that's paid staff, or sometimes like lift maintenance or park maintenance crew who drive the snowmobiles.
I'll just add to Courtney, it really is, we work well with the paid staff, and it's really a team community. We all have radios, and it's about response time. So we stay pretty spread out, pretty high in the mountain, where we can respond to a case anywhere, really within just a few minutes.
Awesome. Well, I think that wraps up all of the questions. Thank you all from Mountain Hood Ski Patrol, Dave, Glenn, and Courtney, for joining us tonight. Going over some great information about what it takes to join Ski Patrol, a little bit about the tryouts, and what life as a ski patroller, volunteer ski patroller looks like. And I did mention this, but I am with Mountain Shop, and there's actually a lot of parallels between Mountain Shop and Mountain Hood Ski Patrol. And I didn't think of it earlier, but 1937 is when Mountain Shop was founded, and Ida and Everett Darr, our founding owners, were actually part of the crew that started the first volunteer ski patrol on Mount Hood. So that's kind of cool. I'll include a link to that information in the follow-up email. If anyone's a history buff or just is intrigued by cool connections like that. And if
You
any,
showed a picture of Dar's Mountain Shop in the presentation. That's really cool.
Yep.
I didn't make that connection. That's very cool.
yeah, actually in the photo, I think it does say the Mountain Shop
It
in the
does.
background.
Yes,
Yeah.
Dar's Mountain Shop.
So that's super cool. A lot of history with the shop and a lot of history with Mount Hood Ski Patrol
I think
intertwined.
there might be something hanging in the first aid room at Timberline with the name Dar on it, because it's a unique name. I'll have to look.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be
The
surprised
light
at all. If the audience has any further questions, is the contact form on Mount Hood Ski Patrol's website the best way to get in touch?
Probably yes.
Okay, cool. I will include a link to that in the follow-up email to everyone, as well as some more information on the tryouts on March 20th, applications and all of that stuff. And yeah, that about wraps it up. Thank you guys. Any last closing comments?
We just appreciate everything you did to let us do this. And anybody know how many people were on? Just out of curiosity.
Looked like about 26 at one point.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we had just under 50 register for the event. So I'll include all of them in the follow-up email, so in case they missed it. And the event was recorded, so I will try and get it downloaded. I'm kind of on vacation now, just tuning in for this. So I will try and get the video downloaded and then uploaded onto our YouTube as soon as I can, but at the very latest, sometime on Monday. So I have that to look forward to.
Great.
All
Thanks for
right,
doing
well,
it.
thank you again. Yeah, have a good one. All right.
Enjoy your vacation.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.